Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
AdvBlueDude.
And SandyClaws.
And tonight, we're talking Mr. Banks. All right, guys, we have been planning this podcast for over a year now. It was brought to us by Mr. England DG, who is... England suggested it probably back in May of last year, I want to say, and he did this whole idea, this whole pitch, where each podcast in this series that we're about to partake in is going to be 10 years or a decade in the life of a Disney park. So we're going to start with Disneyland. We're going to go Disneyland from the 1950s all the way up to the 2010s, because it's like halfway over and we can talk about Star Wars Land and everything like that. And then we'll start back again. We'll go to Magic Kingdom, Epcot, so on and so forth. We're going to round it out. It's going to be a really fun, really interesting, long-form podcast. It's definitely going to be a project that's going to take like probably over a year to complete. So let's get started with it. Disneyland in the 1950s. What we're going to do, we have a whole timetable of events that I kind of did some research on. We're going to go ahead, we're going to talk about it, we're going to break it down. The goal of this podcast is to kind of see just how Disneyland evolved, how maybe some of the things that they were doing then, they're not necessarily doing now, but also some of the things that they were doing then, they're still practicing now. I think a very interesting thing we're going to talk about is Disney's use of intellectual properties throughout the history of Disneyland, like way back when, way before Guardians of the Galaxy took over Tower of Terror, way before, ancient history from that point. We've seen Disney using intellectual properties to advance their theme park promotion. So let's start just kind of back in the day, back before we even had the Disneyland TV show. We had March 27th, 1952. It was the first public announcement of plans for Disneyland. Now, I believe this was like a short, black and white, maybe 10-minute presentation by Walt Disney. He had a map by, I believe the map was by Harper Goff.
Yeah.
Harper Goff. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, the map by Harper Goff in back of him, and he just kind of laid out, like, I want to have a place where the parents and the children can have fun together. What do you guys think of kind of the early inceptions of Disneyland? Of course, Disneyland, like, we're not going to break it down, like, every single incarnation of it, but we've seen the concept art where there's that, like, of the little park across the street from the lot where it's mostly just, like, a train ride circled around a couple flat rides. It grew from that to what it was in opening day. What do you guys think of just the whole, like, evolution in Walt's mind? And, of course, we have the famous Griffith Park carousel story and everything like that. Just give me some general thoughts on the inception of Disneyland.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't sure who was going first.
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I know if I lived back then and I was watching that broadcast, I would probably think, all right, good luck with that, considering how the failure of one film could put you in bankruptcy. Good luck. I would not have much confidence in it. The guy, heck, he has so much creativity. It's pretty unbelievable. Of course, Walt, he found ways to make the impossible reality, and that got him Disneyland, and that got him many other things as well. Kudos to him. Great work. Even though I probably wouldn't have had much faith in it in the beginning.
Well, Sandy, it's funny you mentioned that because nobody had faith in it.
Yeah.
Nobody, absolutely nobody, including Roy Disney. Walt Disney and like a select handful of people that we're about to get into were really the only people that had faith in Disney. Evan, anything you want to say about the initial inception of Disneyland?
I mean, it's an interesting story because it started out really quaintly and really small, and then it kind of exploded. But it's definitely an interesting story. Like, quick plug, I read Knots Preserved, which is a beautiful book, and they talk about Disneyland because, like, when Disneyland was being built, like when it was being planned, Walt visited Knott's
Oh yeah.
every once in a while. Well, not like infrequently, just for like quote-unquote inspiration, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Knott would let him ride his train.
yeah, things like that. But like, it was just interesting to see how it grew from like this very small thing to a much larger thing in a totally different place.
And of course, even before this, you had the Lily Bell in his backyard and that whole miniature
totally.
train set. So
Which I
really
didn't realize
Disneyland
was
in its whole inception kind of was based around trains from the very get-go. Every single piece of artwork you've ever seen from Disneyland has a train involved kind of as the centerpiece of it. Not necessarily the centerpiece, but definitely the thing that's actually going around the property. Even that early quaint attraction at the lot, where it's like, it's still like you've got the steam train is kind of the main example of the attraction that was formed in that early incarnation.
Another little fact I might as well throw out there is that
Sure.
it wasn't exactly there wasn't as much competition for at least the two parks, Knott's and Disneyland, because the ideas were so different in terms of the theming and everything. So I thought,
there was Frontierland and Ghost Town, though.
Not to get too far ahead, but it was interesting to read that when Disneyland first opened, they had like a very they helped each other out. Like when Disneyland ran out of quarters, the Knotts would send quarters over.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. So it was a very like camaraderie.
Cool. Okay, so speaking of camaraderie, we have December 1952. WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, is founded. It's currently Walter Elias Disney, WED, but back then it was WDI.
Well, no. You have it backwards.
I have it backwards.
It was
WED
originally WED, then it became WDI.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Yeah.
You saved me. Okay, so it was initially WED, Walter Elias Disney, and then it became WDI. The birth of Imagineering here, folks. What do you think about this?
It's interesting because it wasn't part of Disney. It was its own company. Like it was WED Enterprises, which is kind of why the name was changed, because it became Walt Disney Imagineering as a subsidiary of Disney.
Mm-hmm.
So like, it's a novel idea.
Sandy, what do you think about the whole idea of like just a few men who had faith in Walt Disney and Walt Disney himself basically operating out of a barn? It's kind of like just the spark of a great thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's amazing. I think Walt was really fortunate to have the kind of people he did, backing him up, because these animators from his studio were also great designers and everything. So I think he was really fortunate in that department.
Of course.
I think, of course, that sparked a whole bunch of other great ideas. Animatronics being one. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Okay, so July 1953, we get some real progress. Walt narrows down Stanford researchers from Stanford University to scout out possible locations for the park, and then on July 21st, 1954, ground breaks on construction in Anaheim. Now, what do you guys think of the whole finding the Anaheim orange groves, kind of the suburbs of LA? It's not close to the beach, which was, of course, the big risk that people were just kind of like, oh, if you go down to Southern California and want to see the beaches, people aren't going to go into the mainland to see some hinky-dink thing that Walt Disney set up. So what do you guys think of the Anaheim locale? And of course, now Anaheim, currently, it's a mecca. It's kind of like, it's crazy. It's like this small town with like crazy like tourist things sprouting up all over it.
I love that like 3 blocks over from Disneyland is like kind of like middle lower class houses.
Basically, yes.
I also like that I'm pretty sure like 7 blocks to the right. I don't know which direction, so I'm just gonna say to the right of Disneyland is a strip club.
Yes, the Flamingo.
Yeah.
The Flamingo.
Yeah, it's right in between Disneyland and Knott's.
I'm glad you mentioned that. You also have things like the Angel Stadium, the Crystal Cathedral, the Discovery Cube. Of course, Knott's Berry Farm itself. All these little things kind of sprouted out from Anaheim. So Sandy, what do you think of the selection of Anaheim as a location?
Well, when I think of Walt Disney, one of the first things that comes to my mind is risk-taking, because Walt Disney was a huge risk-taker. And so I guess it's not really that surprising that, he's willing to take another risk and build his park on, in the mainland where he may not get a ton of business, which ended up not being the case. That's it. I have nothing else to say.
It kind of became a model of theme parks. Like, I can point to a very current example where, I have Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. It used to be Marine World, and that park it drives me crazy how many brochures and how many websites fucking list that park as being in San Francisco. It's not in San Francisco. It's in Vallejo. It's like a 45-minute drive from San Francisco. But
wow, that's inaccurate.
yeah, but you know what I mean? It's just kind of like, it's kind of the same philosophy. Like, Vallejo is essentially like, it's not even really a suburb of San Francisco. It's really more of a suburb of Sacramento. But no one ever labels it as Sacramento, even though Sacramento is the state capital. I digress. But that's just like one example. That's one example. Like Cedar Point kind of being in Sandusky, Ohio. Sandusky, Ohio being being a suburb of major cities in Ohio. You can kind of point to that example all over the place when it comes to theme parks. Okay, so anyways, guys, October 27th, 1954. This is where we have the first bit of synergy between the Disney Company and Disneyland. The Disneyland Story airs as the first official episode of the Disneyland TV show. Let's break this down right now. I think this is a fascinating footnote in the history of the park. What do you guys think of Walt's idea to use the Disneyland TV show as essentially one giant marketing tool for the park itself?
Well, of course, TV was new at the time, and I think that it couldn't have been a more perfect timing. That was a great way to get himself out there and to promote his park and raise money for his park. Again, timing. It's all about timing. That was perfect.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense because that was the easiest way to get the idea out to the masses. Because, I mean, like, even now, Disneyland is very much a locals park. But because it was marketed the way it was... Yeah, but I mean, like, because of the way it was marketed the way it was, like, it's kind of transcended, even though it's still oddly a locals park. But, yeah.
And, of course, TV was new, as I said before, and Walt was all about trying new things and getting new ideas made, and so that's nice.
Definitely. Yeah, it was a brilliant idea, and of course, one of the great things about the Disneyland TV show is it didn't just introduce us to the park. I mean, it was definitely a brilliant marketing gimmick, but they had the Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, and Frontierland, and Adventureland, and there were so many cool things that actually came out of Disneyland, like the Man in Space series by Ward Kimball, which was obviously Tomorrowland. You had Davy Crockett, which was actually originally an incarnation of the Disneyland TV show. It was an episode of Disneyland, which then obviously spiraled into its own thing, which we'll get to. That's a really big part of early Disney history with Disneyland, is Davy Crockett. Anyways, so one of the things that I kind of breezed over that we'll kind of circle back to is July of 1954. Opening construction starts. Opening day is July 17th. That's already been announced. That's already been nailed down. That's what's happening. So all of Disneyland is constructed in the time frame of the year. Now we have January 15th, 1955. Off to a bad start from the very beginning, and it's still suffering from this. Tomorrowland construction begins. Oh boy. Tomorrowland is going to probably be the most fun thing to talk about throughout all of this. But just what do you guys think of this? Just Tomorrowland was delayed. Do you think it was a curse? Do you think Tomorrowland was just inevitably going to be the weakest land in Disneyland throughout all of Disneyland's history?
Yeah, I think so.
It's just so ironic.
Because, of course they had a budget, and if you want to make a Tomorrowland, you're going to need money to make things like, jetpacks is, or monorail reality, and that wasn't exactly a huge thing they had at the time, especially since Disneyland didn't do so great first day, and so that was kind of pulled them back. And yeah, I mean, I think it definitely worked out later on in the 60s, 70s. They got all the new stuff in Monorail and stuff like that. But yeah, I think Curse is a perfect word for the beginning.
Evan, you just recently went to Disneyland's Tomorrowland, and you can agree it's still a massive clusterfuck.
Yes. But, I mean, the problem with Tomorrowland isn't that it's bad. The problem with it is that they just don't know how to do it. Because, like, the problem with Tomorrowland is in the name. That they're trying to make a land based on futuristic technology, but the problem is that futuristic technology is being developed and is becoming obsolete every day.
Exactly.
So you make a ride, and 5 years down the line, it's not futuristic. It's not anything.
Therefore, keep updating it. It becomes a huge hassle.
The fun footnote that original Tomorrowland was themed around the vast and unforeseeable future of 1986. 1986. A whole 26 years away.
Which is why Disney World's Tomorrowland does Tomorrowland better. Because they take a much more fantastical approach. The problem is that it has Monsters, Inc. and Stitch, but it still takes a much better approach than Disneyland's, which is like just a corridor with Buzz Lightyear and Star Tours.
Yeah, Tomorrowland definitely hit its stride in the 60s and 70s, which I'm excited to talk about.
Which was, even then that was different, because they weren't really focusing on tomorrow, they were focusing on transportation, which is why it worked so well.
Exactly. That, like, I think Tomorrowland in the late 60s is one of the most fascinating times. Like, just the 60s, we might have to break the 60s down into a two-part episode, considering how much goes on.
So much happened.
Oh my god, yeah, we can just, like, we're practically gushing over it. So July 4th, 1955, the first test rides of the CK Holiday and E.P. Ripley Disneyland Railroad steam engines circle around the park. I find it really interesting that, this was kind of like, okay, we're done. It's like, oh no, it's like this is about 2 weeks before the opening date. And then this is an event I really want to highlight, guys. And I just like this event on July 13th, 1955. Out of anything in Walt Disney's entire life, this is something that I really want to see put to film somehow. I really want to see this dramatized. July 13th, 1955 was Walt and Lily's 30th anniversary. It was celebrated aboard the Mark Twain, and the anniversary was actually celebrated while the Mark Twain was making its first full trip around the rivers of America. How iconic and how, like, out of a storybook is that moment? I kind of get butterflies in my stomach every time I think about it.
Yeah, it is quite special, I guess. Are we gonna break down the problems, whether minor or big, the team faced while Disneyland was constructing?
Yeah. What do you have in mind?
Just like stuff, like minor or big things, like them filling the big lake with water, and then it falling down into the ground and having to redo it and pave it and stuff.
Right. Yeah, there were a lot of construction follies. Of course, we had the infamous Holiday Hill, which was literally all of the dirt that was dug out of the Sleeping Beauty castle boat. Oh, God. We had, and that later became the Matterhorn. Let's see, any other... Of course, we had the plumber strike, where that was the reason why on Disneyland opening day there were no water fountains. AdvBlueDude, just a quick side note, I could not find one water fountain at Disneyland where the water didn't taste funky.
I thought the one at Pirates was fine.
I guess, yeah, the one at Pirates is rare.
And I think that's the only water fountain that I used.
Fair enough.
It's kind of ironic. It's kind of ironic considering Pirates is a water ride.
Yeah, but Pirates has amazing water. I mean, have you smelled Pirates of the Caribbean? Have you smelled that place?
It has been ages since I've been on Pirates. I was such a little kid when I went. I can't possibly remember the smell. But it being Disneyland, I wouldn't be surprised if the water had a sweet, nice smell.
Well, it's the same smell as Disney World.
Yeah,
It's just the chlorine. But But it's wonderful.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, guys. Now here we get to the main event itself. July 17th, 1955, the press preview day and airing of the Dateline Disneyland TV special hosted by Art Linkletter. Before we get into the lineup of opening day attractions, which we'll kind of have to go through really quick, let's kind of just talk over the clusterfuck that was Dateline Disneyland. A very, very fun and very infamous part of Disneyland's history was the fact that opening day was an unmitigated disaster. The cement on Main Street was freshly poured, and women's high heels would get caught in the cement. We had the aforementioned situation with the no drinking fountains because of the plumber's strike. We had like all these cables everywhere running around Main Street and running all throughout the park with the cameras. People were tripping over them.
I believe trash cans were overflowing too, right?
Yes. Rides were breaking down left and right. If you watch the opening day telecast, it's like some jerk with a camera just did a riff on it because it's honestly like a really, really, really shoddy piece of media just because of all the mistakes that are going on throughout the whole thing. And there's a ton of different there's a ton of different bloopers and stuff that just get worked in because it was a live presentation. Not the best first impression. And of course they had the whole situation where they had they sent out 10,000 invitations, but 50,000 people showed up.
Yeah, because they copied them and invited their friends and whatever.
Right. Opening day was a disaster. Opening day was an absolute disaster. And the press kind of leaped onto it. The press wasn't exactly in favor of Disneyland from the beginning. Maybe the TV show might have sparked some interest. This definitely was like, okay, the press is not happy about this. Walt's folly was an infamous term. Before we get into the opening day attractions, folks, Sandy, AdvBlueDude, any thoughts on this whole very, very funny part of the Disneyland history?
Which one is it again?
Just the opening day and how it was just a disaster.
I think it's funny going back and watching the bloopers of Walt, or like the news reporters, or even bystanders, people in the park.
I don't really have a ton past what you've mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into the opening day attractions. Some of these we won't spend a lot of time on. Some of them we'll kind of highlight. Main Street USA, I'm just kind of going to go down a list, really. We had the Bank of America, which is still there to this day, I believe, in the same location. We had the Carnation Ice Cream Parlor, which, again, one of the things to trace about Main Street is how different companies and different names got added to various locations throughout the years on Main Street. So the Carnation Ice Cream Parlor, Carnation was an original sponsor, and now they have the Carnation Cafe, and they have the Gibson Grill Ice Cream Parlor next door. So just an interesting side note on that. Of course, City Hall and the Emporium, big Main Street fixtures now, big Main Street fixtures then. Fine Tobacco. Oh yeah. And what's more politically incorrect than Fine Tobacco in a Disneyland? How about a fire wagon that was then called the Hose and Chemical Wagon? Hose and Chemical Wagon. Sandy, do you want to take a ride on the Hose and Chemical Wagon?
Not preferably.
Okay. Gibson's greeting cards. I think it's interesting that Gibson's greeting cards can maybe be traced back to Gibson Girl Ice Cream Parlor. I don't know. We had Grandma's Baby Shop. We had the horse-drawn streetcars, horse-drawn Surrey, which is I haven't even seen pictures of that. I don't think.
Of the what again?
The horse-drawn
Surrey's just a carriage.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. But I don't remember carriages. All I remember is a streetcar.
I don't know.
It's like
No, I actually rode in a carriage when I was there years back.
Oh, cool.
It makes sense that they would have them.
Oh yeah. So then we have the Main Street Cinema. There was actually a Main Street shooting gallery. I don't remember where it was. I want to say it was in the Candy Palace because the Candy Palace opened a little bit later. I could be wrong about that.
Could it be in the Penny Arcade?
No, the Penny Arcade was on opening day.
Oh, okay.
So it could have been like, because the Candy Palace and the Penny Arcade are very close to each other. So one I'm picturing is maybe.
That's what I mean, like connected or inside.
Yeah, so maybe
part of it, yeah.
so maybe the Penny Arcade was like its own thing, and the Candy Palace, like maybe I'm kind of picturing like the Main Street Shooting Arcade was inside of the Penny Arcade.
Yeah,
And,
that's what I would think.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, folks were kind of just trying to give you a mental image.
Maybe
Okay,
over where
so-
the player piano is. I don't know how old that
Yeah.
was.
We have the Market House, which is a Starbucks now, but honestly, guys, I think they did an impressive job of maintaining a lot of the vibe of the Market House with the Starbucks. You've still got the checkerboard. You can still just sit there and play checkers, which I think is really cool if you want to. You've still got the phones. Evan, did you get a chance to check out the phones in the Market House where you can listen in and eavesdrop on the conversations?
Oh, I checked out one of them. It was in the store. I don't know what store it was. In Disney World, it's the candy shop.
Okay.
It's directly across from the Emporium.
So you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I just forget which one it was that I used.
Like we said, the Penny Arcade opened, the Plaza Pavilion, which in my opinion is probably the best restaurant in Disneyland.
The shooting gallery in Main Street was where we thought it was.
Cool.
It's kind of. Oh, actually, it's kind of like in that area. It's weird.
Okay, so we had the Red Wagon Inn, which I believe that was where the Plaza Pavilion was going to go later. And of course, the Red Wagon Inn became the Little Red Wagon, which is the famous corn dog stall. We had the Refreshment Corner, which is one of my favorite places at Disneyland. We had Rugel's China and Glass Shop, which later just became, I believe, the Main Street China Shop. And, of course, the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad was an opening day attraction. We had the Storybook Shop, we had an Upjohn Pharmacy, and finally a Wurlitzer Music Hall, which later became 21st Century Music, or 20th Century Music. Sandy, any kind of opinions on these opening lineup of Main Street? Kind of interesting, sort of how it's almost half and half. It's almost like half of the stuff is still there and half of it has been replaced over the years.
Well, I think it's great they have, they have a bunch of shops and it's not just a facade. I don't have much else to say other than that. I don't have many memories of these shops on Main Street. I guess I don't feel as strongly about Main Street as I do the rest of the park. That's just me, though. And
that's funny because I've always been someone who, Evan, like, you saw me at Disneyland, like, you know how much I was into Main Street, and Main Street has always been one of my favorite spots in the park.
I'm not huge into it either. I mean, I appreciate it. It's just
me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a great piece that Walt, I definitely appreciate it for the sake, Walt put it in because he had his own memories of Kansas and stuff. So,
of course, it's a recreation of Marceline, Missouri. We should also mention the whole thing where Walt wanted it to be a movie transition, where the Mickey Floral was the lobby, the tunnel with the movie posters were the previews. Main Street USA is kind of like the establishing shot, and then from Main Street USA into the hub is kind of like you get to form your own movie from there. Which I think is very fascinating, guys. What do you think, just in general? Like, Disneyland incorporated a lot of movie-making techniques, forced perspective probably being the main one. I think it's fascinating how Disneyland was a blend of movie-making and theme park, or amusement parks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it was Missouri, not Kansas. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. He moved to Kansas. He moved to Kansas when he was a child, yeah. Anyways, so Adventureland, we have the Jungle Cruise and the Adventureland Bazaar. The Jungle Cruise was probably the main attraction at Disneyland. What do you guys think in general of how the Jungle Cruise was promoted? And I think it was probably one of the few attractions on opening day that really people were pretty satisfied with what they saw.
I remember watching those videos a while back of how they made Disneyland, and there was definitely a huge chunk of it was the making of the Jungle Cruise, and I was really blown away. They got it done. They got it done in less than a year, and I think it's always been one of my favorite rides. It's fascinating, and I've always appreciated it.
Of course, the Jungle. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just kind of confused. What I was saying? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No Adventure Blue Dude?
I was just gonna say that it was different in the 50s because it was all serious until Mark Davis came into it, which is interesting. And I know what they were trying to go for with like True Life Adventures type thing, but yeah.
I also think that the use of like the wind, like I forget what they called it, but like the rhinos would just be on springs and they'd bounce back and forth because of the wind, and it looked like they were moving. Because that was before they had animatronics and stuff, so I thought that was interesting.
There were a few robotics, like they'd have like very, very simple movements, like pulley systems and stuff like that. Yeah. But there was no audio involved in it. Okay. Yeah. Anyways, so there might have been audio, but it was not as good as audio animatronics. It was mostly kind of like sound effects. And it's still kind of how it is to this day, where you hear the sound effects cued with the animation, but you don't necessarily see it synced up with the lips and everything the same way you would at a Pirates or something like that.
It kind of gives it a nice charm,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so one of the things also to mention about the Jungle Cruise is back in the day, in addition to it having a serious tone, the Jungle Cruise has very much grown out over the years, which I think that's a fascinating element about the ride, is the jungle itself is kind of consistently growing thicker and thicker as it evolves and as it gets older. Like, I remember it being thicker now than it was back, like, in 2002 when I first visited. And of course, back in the day, there was kind of like orange trees that they fashioned to look like jungle trees.
Yeah, they switched upside down with the roots up.
Of course, yeah. And so it really started from very humble beginnings in terms of like how the jungle actually looked. And now I think that's a fascinating thing, that the jungle itself, the star attraction of the ride, has really kind of evolved in its own right very naturalistically.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how it's grown. Like, I've seen pictures of the version in Disney World where, like, right after it opened, the savannah looked like a savannah where you couldn't see trees in the back. And then that kind of it was really cool, and then it got overgrown. But, yeah.
Okay, and then we have the Adventureland Bazaar, which is still there, and it continues to be, in my opinion, probably the best shop in Disneyland, at least in terms of offering original merchandise.
It's one of them.
The Adventureland Bazaar also has Shrunken Ned, and it also has an Indiana Jones pinball machine, which win.
I love that was still there.
Yes.
Because I remember playing that 10 years ago.
Of course. I remember when I was waiting for you when we were going to meet up at Aladdin's Oasis, I really wanted to play a game of that, but I couldn't leave the Aladdin's Oasis spot. And it was kind of killing me. I was like, oh, God, I really want to play the Indiana Jones pinball.
Aladdin's Oasis, is that show?
Yeah, we'll get into Aladdin's Oasis in the 90s. Yeah. Okay. It's been a few things over the years. It's been a meet and greet. It's been a show. It was kind of...
I went and I saw the show.
What?
I went and saw the show when I was there.
Yeah.
I digress, though. I'm sorry.
Okay. So, Frontierland, this kind of took up half the park, and of course Davy Crockett was the main thing. We'll kind of get into Davy Crockett kind of being like a big marketing tool for Disneyland. But they had the Chicken Plantation restaurant, they had the Davy Crockett arcade, which would later become the Frontierland Shooting Gallery, the Frontierland Trading Post, which is still there, the Golden Horseshoe Review, starring the great Wally Bogue. The Golden Horseshoe itself is still there, but unfortunately the theater is vacant, and they really need to get on their asses and do something with it, quite frankly. Because it's just like, because I love going in there, but it's like, it's kind of pointless if they don't have a show playing in there.
They had a little show when I walked in there the first day.
Was it Laughingstock?
No, they had like a pianist.
Oh, really?
And,
that's cool.
Yeah, they had like it was a small show, and it wasn't like the actual show, but it was something.
Of course. All right.
Whereas in Florida, all they have is a player piano.
Oh, God.
Just in the center of the stage, and they have like a big sign advertising the amazing mechanical piano. It just does nothing. Like, that's it.
Oh, God.
Tiki, you said the Davy Crockett arcade later turned into the shooting expedition.
Correct.
I was wondering where that came in. Because I couldn't find a year where that shooting expedition came in.
I believe I have it on this timeline somewhere.
You do? Okay.
The last surviving shooting arcade.
Right.
They
God,
started
I
with
love
3, they
that
ended with 1.
Exactly.
I love that shooting exhibition.
Okay. So, of course, the Mark Twain Riverboat was there. I think the Mark Twain Riverboat was also something that was featured very prominently in Disneyland. It was always a big icon of the park from day one.
Well, I mean, it's a huge spectacle. So.
Of course. And then they had the Mule Pack and the Stagecoach in the Nature's Wonderland area, which is now the Big Thunder Mountain area. I think a lot of interesting attention is paid to that area over the 50s, which we're going to trace. Okay, so Fantasyland. We had Canal Boats of the World, not Storybook Land Canal Boats, Wikipedia. Storybook Land Canal Boats did not open on July 17, 1955. Canal Boats of the World, which the Imagineers lovingly called just kind of like a trip through muddy riverbanks with a whole lot of nothing.
Just like the world.
Right? Exactly. Okay, we had King Arthur's Carousel, the Mad Tea Party, which I believe the Mad Tea Party is roughly in where Dumbo's location is now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Switch
And
cities.
it kind of had the red and yellow spiral motif instead of the because right now because you know what I mean. It had the
I
red
thought it
and
was
yellow.
a red yellow spiral now.
It might be, but it's not as pronounced.
That's probably the coloring of the picture.
Probably, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Okay, Merlin's Magic Shop, which Evan, do you know where this was? I want to say
Yes.
it might have been where?
Do you know where the armor shop is?
The armor shop. No, I don't.
It's if you walk out of the exit of Sleeping Beauty, there's a shop directly to the right. Like, you know, like that path that leads down towards like the Snow White Fountain.
Yeah.
There's a door right to the left that leads into a shop that's an armor shop, and that's where it was.
Oh, wow. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
What were you guys talking about? Red and yellow spiral thing at the Mad Tea Party?
The ground of the Mad Tea Party.
I'm
Yeah,
just wondering if that motif was like changed drastically when they redid the ride. Because keep in mind,
Because I looked it up now, and it looks like kind of a magenta and purple.
Oh, magenta. Oh, okay.
That sounds right too.
Yeah.
Kind of like a Trix yogurt.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, both the Dumbo and the Mad Tea Party flat rides were essentially completely replaced in the 80s.
Yeah.
And,
It looks like the Cheshire Cat. That's what it looks like.
Another fun fact, Steve Martin worked at the Magic Shop in Fantasyland, and
Yes,
I
he
learned
did.
that from Monkey's mother. And that's also why I know where that is.
Love you, Amy. Okay, so Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, one of your personal favorites, AdvBlueDude.
You know it. Yeah.
Peter Pan's Flight. Just AdvBlueDude, you experienced it firsthand. The fucking crowd control situation on Peter Pan's Flight right now is insane.
I wanted to ride it every day and never got around to it.
You never got around to it.
That's the one ride in the park that I didn't ride.
Oh my god! Wow.
Tiki, you were
insane.
super fortunate to get there before the huge crowd of people.
Well, that's because you didn't. That's because you did the magical mornings. We went on
Yeah,
the
I did the
Matterhorn
magical
during that.
morning rope drop. Like, I was there on rope drop of the magical morning. That's
We were
what
there-
you have to do to get on it.
We were there at 7:20. We did the Matterhorn. They were like, "Hey, let's go to Toontown because that makes sense because everyone flocks there when the park opens."
Oh. Oh god. Oh god. So something's got to be done with Peter Pan. Like,
It
they
needs
literally...
Fast Pass. I
they
hate to
literally-
say it, but it does.
It does. It absolutely does. The one thing I have to say about Peter Pan, just my story / rant on Peter Pan, is they open up the rest of Fantasyland during, like, right after the fireworks, and that whole thing has turned into like a park-wide event of this massive crowd of people encircling Fantasyland, wanting to get into fucking Peter Pan, and it's become so bad that they have to reopen Peter Pan like a half hour to 45 minutes after the rest of Fantasyland, just quietly, just to keep that mob of people down.
That's one thing I like about Disney World is that they don't close Fantasyland, which I mean, which makes sense because they have the space. But like I've seen the fireworks at Disney World from New Fantasyland, and it's just so much easier. That you don't have to deal with the bullshit crowds that like they close off a third of the park. So like it's just
that's
impossible
one
to
thing
get
that
anywhere.
Disneyland absolutely needs to work on. I really think they need to find another place to shoot off the fireworks from because it's a ridiculous situation.
Yes.
And
I apologize. I just don't see what the huge rush is for Peter Pan. I mean, it's charming, and I honestly think it's no better than Alice in Wonderland or Mr. Toad.
It's not that there's a huge rush, it's that it's very popular because of the concept of the ride. It has it has probably the worst capacity of any of the rides in Fantasyland.
Yes, that's true.
And people flock to it at night because they think, oh, it's been a long line all day. Let's check when everyone else is going to check at night. So it's just bad always.
Always. Yeah. Unless you show up at rope drop during a magic morning hour.
Yes.
And become like the 5th person in the queue, like I was. Yeah. Okay. So on that note, I'm sorry for that little rant. On that note, we had Sleeping Beauty's Castle and Snow White's Scary Adventures. Sleeping Beauty Castle, of course, the interesting footnote about that was this was promotion for a movie that was 3 years away. So what do you guys think about that? Kind of like, they could have gone with Snow White's Castle. They could have gone with Cinderella's Castle, which, of course, they eventually did do in Disney World. Interesting decision.
I think it's great that they had all the promotional stuff inside the castle as well as the castle itself. But the fact that they still
the diorama didn't open until a little while later, Sandy.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well,
what was that, 59?
Something like that.
Didn't they have promotional stuff inside the castle when it first opened, though?
I don't know.
They might have. I don't.
Because I know the diorama didn't come till later, but I'm pretty sure they still had stuff inside.
Right.
Whether it was I'm not sure, but promotional stuff.
They might have. The structure was there.
I think it's great how they still have that stuff in there now. I mean, of course, it's changed drastically, but I think it's great how they still kept all that in.
It was really nice to walk through.
That is still one of my favorite elements of Disneyland. It was closed for the longest time when I was going there as a kid, and so I only just got to discover it recently when I went there with Monkey in March, and I freaking love it. I absolutely love being able to actually walk into the castle, feel the walls, feel the stained glass windows that are actually part of the castle exterior. It's a freaking cool experience. Mm-hmm. Anyways, so Tomorrowland, we have Autopia. After rewriting Autopia post-refurbishment, I've got to say I'm glad it's still there, but it needs to be cut down to just Tomorrowland and not intrude on like half of Fantasyland.
I like Autopia. I like it much more than the Tomorrowland Speedway.
Of course, because it actually has a running theme, and it kind of shows, ironically enough, I feel like Autopia is one of the few things in Tomorrowland that actually correctly is a good representation of, hey, we're going to showcase the future.
Yeah, I really liked Autopia. Part of it may be because we went on it with no line, but I really liked it, and I was surprised at how long it was.
Of course, we still got stuck in a massive traffic jam that took
15 that's because there was nobody on the ride. So, I don't know why they sent us through that line, because if nobody's on the ride, how the fuck are we gonna, get off?
Of course, right. Okay. Okay, so let's see.
Okay.
We had Circarama USA, which was a precursor to Circle Vision. We had the Clocks of the World, which I think was an interesting little showcase in Tomorrowland, where they would show the time from, all kinds of different countries throughout the world. We had the Monsanto Hall of Chemistry, kind of the start of the relationship between Disney and Monsanto.
God, what if that happened now?
I know, right? Space Station X1, which was kind of the satellite view of America. Okay, Sandy, anything you want to say about any of this?
No, not really.
Just checking. Okay, finally, July 18th, 1955, Disneyland opened to the public with general admission costing $1. And the cost of the attractions ranged from 10 cents to 35 cents, so the ticket system wasn't really in place. You'd have individual charges for the individual rides, which I think was kind of interesting. Also, you had the Puffin Bakery and the Silhouette Studio open on Main Street. So the Silhouette Studio, not technically an opening day attraction, even though it's still there. And I know quite a few people who make it a tradition to get a Silhouette every time they go to Disneyland.
I kind of regret not doing that because I was really surprised by the Silhouette Studio. First of all, being there. Second of all, being so prominently shown. And it's just a really good placing. Placement.
Totally.
Yeah.
Of course, that's the place that has the famous porch.
Yeah. Well, it's right next to it, I believe.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Okay, July 22nd, 1955, we have the Candy Palace, which opens on Main Street, and Rocket to the Moon. Now, this is an interesting thing. Rocket to the Moon kind of predates the moon landing by over a decade here. Kind of interesting little footnote of Tomorrowland becoming today.
Hmm.
And then July 31st, 1955, I want to highlight Casey Jr. Circus Train. Of course, it isn't the attraction that it is today because the storybook land dioramas themselves weren't in place. I honestly think the older I get, the more I love this attraction. I think there's nothing else like it in the world, practically. Like, I get sentimental about this ride because I have strong childhood memories connected to this ride. I've loved it then. I love it even more now. It's super charming. It's one of the best miniature train rides in the country, if not the single best. I love it. I could just go on and on about how much I love the attraction. Just really. I'm just a fanboy for the Casey Jr. Circus Train.
I really like it as well. I felt awkward being the oldest person on the train, but that's fine.
I remember I have one memory of going there as a child, and they were having the parade, and we were getting on the train right as the parade was starting. I remember seeing a bunch of characters walking by when I was up on the ridge on Casey Jr. And I saw the genie. I really wanted to see the genie. And I was really disappointed because I came back down and the genie was gone, and I missed it because of Casey Jr.
Oh, AdvBlueDude, you guys kind of left after this happened, but I forgot to highlight just how amazing the Mad Tea Party is during Paint the Night.
You said that, and I'm sure it would be.
Like, I got off of it, I instantly went through and did it again. I was like, oh my god. Oh, yes. Just yes. Okay, so August 1st, 1955, we have the Conestoga Wagons, which open in Frontierland as part of that little collective of attractions that eventually becomes Big Thunder. And we had the Color Gallery and the World Beneath Us open in Tomorrowland. I don't really know about a whole lot about either of these. It's just kind of like the corporate attractions that used to kind of come and go from Tomorrowland back in the early days. Mm. Okay, so are you ready for one of the big promotional tie-ins? Was August 3rd, 1955. They had the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea walkthrough. This featured a ton of recreations of the sets, a ton of original props from the movie. Of course, you had the famous organ room, which now the organ is now in the Haunted Mansion. You had a recreation of the squid. AdvBlueDude, you're the big 20,000 Leagues fan, so have you done any research into what this was like?
Not in a while. All I know is that it was very hard to set up, and they were still putting it together the night before it opened, and it wasn't that good, I don't believe.
I mean, I think it was fondly remembered, though. I think it's not...
Yeah.
Like, by people who did go through it, I think there's a lot of memories attached to it, with the squid and everything, with the organ room. There's a lot of kind of classic Disney iconography that still exists in the park that came out of this. Okay, but anyways, guys, I hate to do this, but in August 9th, 1955, and August 11th, 1955, I'm sure these locations were really cool in their own ways, especially Casa Fritos, but... in this corner, we have the black stereotype, the Aunt Jemima Pancake House. And in this corner, we have the Mexican stereotype, the Casa Fritos.
Casa Fritos wasn't really a Mexican stereotype because
they had a lot of Bandito-like characters.
But they had Frito the Kid.
Okay, so Frito the Kid. Let's talk about Frito the Kid. One of my favorite things about old Disneyland, and if Disneyland ever revived him, I would honestly be, like, so happy.
I'm honestly surprised that they haven't yet.
I really think they should. I really think they should.
And it's also where the Dorito was born.
Of course, yeah.
Aunt Jemima did nothing. They just made pancakes.
It's really hard for me to imagine Aunt Jemima's Pancake House in Disneyland.
They had a walk-around character and everything.
I'm sorry?
They had a character?
They did.
Do they still?
Frick?
No, obviously they don't still. Come on. No.
I would have taken my picture with Aunt Jemima. It would have been great.
I have seen
I
video
would have
footage.
got her autograph.
I've seen video footage from the Extinct Attractions Club of an Aunt Jemima walk-around character out there.
Oh my god.
Why?
That's
Why?
the best.
Right?
That's the best thing I've ever heard in my life. That people flock to Disneyland to meet.
It wasn't a success until Aunt Jemima. That was when the whole negative press
Yeah.
around happened. Oh, dear God.
Where was it in Frontierland?
I want to say it was kind of
Over
like...
the stage door?
No, I want to say it was kind of near where New Orleans is.
Okay.
Because I know it was kind of like off of the main kind of drag of Frontierland with the Golden Horseshoe and the stagecoaches and everything.
Yeah.
They kind of had it up on a hill a little bit, kind of like a plantation house. It was where the old Frontierland Plantation House restaurant was.
That's even better.
Right.
I know that Casa Fritos is over where Rancho del Socalo
Rancho del Socalo,
is.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I would honestly love it if they just rethemed Rancho del Socalo back into Casa Fritos.
But I love Rancho del Socalo.
Rancho del Socalo is great, but I mean, Casa Fritos was such a unique location. It's themed dining before themed dining was really prevalent in Disney parks.
But they had some of the best Mexican food and some of the best food in Disneyland.
I agree.
How would you know that?
I ate that. Well, not Casa Fritos. I'm talking about Rancho del Socalo.
Oh, okay.
Casa Fritos just had Fritos. So really,
No,
if
not
you like
necessarily.
Fritos.
Casa Fritos had other things. It was a Mexican restaurant.
Was it?
Yeah. It's just the Fritos vending machine was the most famous thing about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that and Cafe Orleans were probably the two best places to eat in Disneyland.
Okay, so August 15th, 1955, we have the opening of the Phantom Boat, which is one of the most ill-fated attractions in Disneyland history. It was in the Submarine Lagoon. It was self-powered, self-driven motorboats that the guests could just go out and drive around in the lagoon, and they would break down constantly. Oh, God. Not the most well-thought-out thing in the world. We'll get to the first... What?
Why is it called the Phantom Boats if you control it?
I have no idea.
That's my question. That would make sense if it was on a track.
It
You could
sounds
control
cool.
it.
It was originally, Sandy, you're right. It was originally called the Tomorrowland Boats, and Walt renamed it the Phantom Boats, literally probably just because it had a jazzier ring to it. Okay. So, August 16th, 1955, common misconception is that Dumbo was an opening day attraction. It was not. It debuted like a month later, almost a whole month later from July 17th. Okay, so the Mickey Mouse Club Theater opened in Fantasyland on August 27th, 1955, the location that Pinocchio's Daring Journey and I believe also the Village House is now. Mickey Mouse Club Theater was just kind of this showcase for Mickey Mouse Club cartoons. I also believe they would film Mickey Mouse Club episodes from there.
I think they did, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a big cross-promotional thing. People will go to Disneyland to see the Mouseketeers in
Can
person.
meet Cubby in person.
What do you guys... Yeah, Cubby. What do you guys think of the Mickey Mouse Club as a promotional tool?
I mean, it makes sense.
Okay.
I'm not huge into Mickey Mouse Club because I'm not a child from the 50s or a child from the early. But it makes sense for the time.
Mickey Mouse Club is totally a baby boomer relic, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they had the revival.
Yeah, they did, but do you want to watch the revival? Do you want to sit
I
down
don't
and
even
watch
remember it.
full
That was
episodes
like
of Revival?
97, 98. I should remember that, and I don't.
I know. I'm with you. I don't remember it at all. I just remember it wasn't 97. It was.
Yeah, it was like 91.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyways.
and that makes more sense.
August 29th, 1955, the Chicken of the Sea pirate ship opens in Fantasyland. This is one of my favorite cool relics of old Disneyland that I honestly, I don't know where they'd have the space to bring it back. Maybe by the old Motorboat Lagoon. But
totally put it there. Or even by, Small World.
That's what they should do. They should put it in the
lot of
Motorboat
land near Small World.
Yeah, that's a huge empty space. It's weird.
Right?
It's like the widest area in the park.
Well, of course, Nightmare Before Christmas was supposed to be there, but unfortunately.
That's true. Nightmare Before Christmas was supposed to be there. You're right.
Just
You're
love that
right.
it's a park of bottlenecks and then 1 acre of nothing.
Tim Burton, why?
Okay. I'm gonna skip over Hobbyland because I honestly don't know much about it. September 8th, 1955 was the 1 millionth guest, and it was also kind of where the public opinion of Disneyland was really starting to turn around. Of course, because they reached 1 million guests so early. I think this was where people were like, okay, well, Walt must be doing something right with this.
Yeah.
Okay. So September 16th, 1955, the Canal Boats of the World closes. October 5th, 1955, the Disneyland Hotel opens on a 60-acre piece of land. The Disneyland Hotel was not owned and operated by Disney initially. It was owned and operated by a separate company. What do you guys think of the Disneyland Hotel and kind of the idea? Like, this was, of course, the first Disney resort. Disney resorts became much more prominent at Walt Disney World, which we'll talk about in a far, far further off. Like, I think we could do like a whole podcast series like Disney World resorts by the decade, but that's a whole different thing.
That would be so long, but yes.
That's what I'm saying. Anyways. Okay. So, October 11th, 1955, ticket booths were first introduced featuring A through C tickets, so not even D tickets yet, just A through C, which is interesting. Okay, November 11th, 1955, the tent raising ceremony for the very ill-fated Mickey Mouse Club Circus, which was which was the first major flop of Disneyland. Okay, now here's an interesting little cross-promotional tie-in right here. The Davy Crockett's Keel Race airs exclusively on ABC in the Disneyland show, and it's basically a cleverly marketed preview for Mike Fink's Keel Boats, which is going to open on Christmas of that year. So what do you guys think just in general, the whole, like, Davy Crockett was, of course, one of the big, massive pop culture things. He was everywhere. Like, Davy Crockett was the Pokemon Go of July 1955.
Like, I mean, it was more of a cultural phenomenon than that.
Right, exactly. You couldn't get away from it.
He had his songs. And his coonskin caps.
The coonskin caps, of course, that was like probably the first really famous bit of Disneyland merchandise was the coonskin caps.
And now he has wine.
Oh God.
How do you know, is Fess Parker dead?
I want to say no. I don't know for sure, but I want to say no. I want to say he's still alive.
Not sure either. Actually, he might have died like last year or the year before.
Maybe.
Now that I'm thinking of it, all I know is that he has wine. He has Fess Parker wine.
That's great. Of course, Fess Parker would make regular appearances in Disneyland as well as Davy Crockett.
He died 6 years ago.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
In 2010.
Okay, I think I remember that, yeah. Anyways, speaking of Davy Crockett, no, I'm sorry. November 24th, 1955, the Mickey Mouse Club Circus opens, and it closes not even 2 months later on January 8th, 1955.
Yeah.
Considered Disneyland's first major flop because no one wants to go to Disneyland just to spend time going to a circus.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's see. December 1st, the Aluminum Hall of Fame opens in Tomorrowland, which is like one of many funny corporate sponsored exhibits that doesn't last long. Okay, and like I said, December 25th, 1955, Mike Fink's Keel Boats open in Frontierland to a whole generation of kids stoked on the Davy Crockett phase of 1955, and this is a perfect example of Disneyland using popular IPs to benefit themselves and to raise guest awareness from very early on, with Christmas, Mike Fink's Keel Boats being a very prominent new attraction, and the Mike Fink TV special just aired in November. What do you guys think of that whole tie-in? I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that I pulled from the research.
No, I mean, it's interesting, and it's something that they did a lot.
Oh yeah.
In the early days, and sort of now, but in a different way.
Okay, so now we're on to 1956 now, and it'll probably go a lot quicker, obviously. So January 15th, 1956, the Phantom boats close. They briefly reopen for the 1956 summer season because, hey, fuck it, we need to have something. But then close again. February 1st, 1956, the Pack Mules close in Frontierland. February 19th, Keller's Jungle Killers opens in the previous Mickey Mouse Club Circus location, and it's also a flop. It lasts a few months more than Mickey Mouse Club Circus did. Okay. March 24th, 1956, was the Astrojets coming into Tomorrowland. The Astrojets had a few incarnations in Tomorrowland. This was kind of the one where the interesting little gimmick of this was, in addition to being the Dumbo thing where you control the elevation, the rockets were also on a spinning spiral, which would go kind of like up and down this tower. So you had kind of like the two motions of the up and down. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Which is a unique kind of thing, and it didn't go as high as the other Astro Orbiters go, but we had the rocket jets, which I think they still, like, Astro Orbiter is a giant bottleneck, and they need to move it up to the People Mover station where it belongs. I digress. And then they, of course, have the Astro Orbiter. April 5th, 1956, was the opening of the most epic Disneyland attraction until they opened Chippendale's Treehouse. It was the Crane Bathroom of the Future. Which is just kind of a funny little side note whenever Disneyland history gets brought up. Yes, the Bathroom of the Future did actually exist. Yes. That was the thing. Okay, June 16th, 1956, we have Tom Sawyer's Island. And the rafts, which open in Frontierland. So that was really kind of the big attraction of 1956, I want to say, was Tom Sawyer's Island. Because that kind of changed the landscape of Frontierland from basically the rivers of America just circled around this weird sort of island with not much of a theme to suddenly the Tom Sawyer thing kind of just anchored Frontierland a way that it hadn't been before. Also, interesting little side note, the 3D Jamboree begins playing at the Mickey Mouse Club Theater, and I believe this is the first 3D-based attraction in the theme park, so that's an interesting kind of historical... It's a Mickey Mouse Club 3D presentation. And then, of course, on that same day, June 16th, we have the Storybook Land Canal Boats opening, which the whole back area of Storybook Land mixed with Casey Jr., one of my favorite spots in the park. Okay.
Yeah.
July 23rd, 1956, we have the Skyway to Fantasyland and Tomorrowland. Something that it's like, on one hand, I wish it was still there. On another hand, I kind of understand why they got rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just safety stuff.
Exactly. Safety and logistics and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay. June 26, 1956. We had the Rainbow Mountain Pack Mules open in Frontierland, and this was kind of the first predecessor to Nature's Wonderland, where, you had the Rainbow Mountains instead of the Rainbow Caverns, which I think is interesting.
Mm.
And then you had the Rainbow Mountain Stagecoach. On July 2nd, 1956, they had the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. This is interesting because it's essentially the Rainbow Caverns finale of Nature's Wonderland, just as its own separate attraction. And this is also something that Disneyland would do sometimes, where they would put one part of an attraction and then, of course, put it into other things. Like, of course, we saw the Primeval World go into the Disneyland Railroad after it was in the World's Fair.
Heck yes, I love that.
Right. AdvBlueDude's very sour about that.
Someday I'll ride it.
Someday.
You're sour about that?
Oh, no, I've been trying to ride it for 10 years.
The Disneyland Railroad was
I thought you didn't like it.
Oh,
No.
I've ridden literally everything from the World's Fair except for that.
Oh.
And Skyway, obviously.
I love the Mysterious Island music they play over it, and tops it off.
Okay, so we have... Yeah, I think that's interesting that essentially the finale of Nature's Wonderland was its own attraction before Nature's Wonderland opened. I find that a really fascinating piece of history right there.
Yeah.
July 4th, 1956, what better way to celebrate our independence than with the Indian War Canoes? the very applicable Indian War Canoes. Oh boy. I just love that it opened on the 4th of July. I'm sorry, folks. I'm sorry. Call me politically incorrect. I just find that irony very amusing.
It was a different time.
It is.
When Aunt Jemima walked the streets.
Oh, God. Oh, God. Okay, so July 23rd, 1956 was the Junior Autopia, which opened in Fantasyland.
I'm sorry, Tiki. They had Aunt Jemima, but no Uncle Remus.
Oh, God.
That's not until the 90s.
No. Okay, we had August 18th, 1956 was the Carnation Plaza Gardens, which opened at the Hub. This is now the storybook. What is it? AdvBlueDude, the fairy tale fair.
Fantasy Fair.
Yeah, which I think is very good in its own right,
I
think overall it is probably an improvement. Having said that, there was a charm to the Carnation Plaza Gardens because. Yeah. It was a dance hall, like, lots of people have memories of dancing, like, having their first dance, having their first kiss with a girl there, just really, really kind of historical stuff going on at the Plaza Gardens. One of Walt's favorite spots in the park as well. August 22nd, 1956 was the Carefree Corner on Main Street. This was a greeting card shop that was there for about 2 decades or 3 decades, I want to say. It closed in the 80s, so 3 decades. Okay. August 24th, 1956 was the Main Street Omnibus, which opened with trips from Main Street to Town Square to Sleeping Beauty Castle. What is your guys' favorite Main Street vehicle if you had to pick one?
I've never really ridden them. I always want to.
There's a trolley, right?
Sort of. It's horse-drawn, but yes.
Yes, and then there's also the red car trolley at DCA.
I guess, yeah, maybe what I'm thinking of. Or maybe the Toontown trolley, which isn't there anymore, of course, but...
it's still there, it just doesn't operate.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant.
Which is weird, because I love that, all the mechanisms are there. You can just walk up and, screw with the control panel, but it doesn't work.
Exactly.
That'd probably be a huge, piece of, why people want to go. I don't know why they wouldn't bring it back, but I think that the bus, there's a bus, right? The double-decker bus?
Yeah, the omnibus.
That's my favorite then.
Yeah.
It's most people's favorite. I'm personally partial to the fire truck myself.
No.
Okay, anyway, so September 5th, 1956, Keller's Jungle Killers closes, and they're probably figuring at this point, let's stop with the circus shit. December 20th, 1956, Disneyland USA was a Technicolor short film that was released in theaters, and it got a lot of acclaim. It was the first time that audiences who hadn't been to Disneyland before, who had only saw Disneyland on TV, now got to see it in Technicolor. So that, back in, now when we think about it, it's seeing Disneyland in color, of course, but when you think about it like that, where it's you see it on TV and it's in black and white, and then suddenly to go out to a movie theater and to see it not only on the big screen, but in full Technicolor, back in the day, I really appreciate how good of a gimmick that was. And it definitely spread interest to the park even further. Okay.
Totally.
So June 16th, 1957, Holidayland opens in the area that will eventually become New Orleans Square. This was essentially just kind of a picnic area, and it's kind of a jokey thing that people talk about, where it wasn't the most creative use of space in Disneyland. It was essentially just a bunch of picnic tables.
But, a lot of parks have that. Even Knott's has that.
And Six Flags has it, yes. But I feel like you can do an area like that. Okay, for example, the Boardwalk Pizza and Pasta at California Adventure has an area that's just a bunch of tables for seating, but it's a nice little area. There's a bunch of gardens around you. They have a stage for live music. It's I feel like if you're going to do an area like that, don't just have it be picnic tables. You got to have something else to it. And especially because this is Disneyland.
Yeah.
Theme it.
Right, exactly. Okay. So June 26, 1957 is one of my personal favorite little side notes of Disney history, which is the Viewliner train, which opened in Tomorrowland. The Viewliner was essentially the monorail design on a train track. So what Bob Gurr did was he essentially designed the Viewliner as kind of like this express train, kind of going over the same route that I don't know, AdvBlueDude, do you remember what route it would take? It would go over like near Autopia, I want to say.
I was going to ask you the same because I'm not entirely sure of the route either.
I'm not entirely sure either, folks. I apologize. It was over near the submarine voyage, I want to say.
Yeah, like it was in that area.
Sure,
I
sure.
think, well, it was before they made the lagoon as well. So
No,
I'm
the
pretty
lagoon
sure.
was there.
Was the lagoon there? I apologize.
Yeah, because the Phantom Boats was there.
Oh, fuck, you're right.
I don't think they had like the waterfalls or anything, but there was definitely the lagoon.
Yeah, I mean, I just went around that area. I just don't know where exactly.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. This is one of my personal favorite Bob Gurr stories. How he essentially just took like the train, like the design of the train from the Viewliner, and repurposed it for the monorail. Okay. Viewliner, like I said, man, like if I could find like a collectible like figure of the Viewliner or something like that, I'd love to have it. Anyways,
Surprised that there's not one.
there should be.
They should do that.
They had the. I could have gotten a model TWA Moonliner.
That's cool. That's cool.
They have it at World of Disney.
Okay, so July 12th, 1957, the Frontierland Shooting Gallery opens, and it's later retitled the Frontierland Shooting Exposition, and it's still there to this day.
One of my favorite attractions in Disneyland, even though it's so simple, but it's one of my favorites. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, this is an interesting side note. July 13th, 1957, the Petrified Tree was installed in Frontierland. Do you guys know the story of the Petrified Tree?
I'm familiar with it.
Yes.
It's still there. It was AdvBlueDude. Do you want to tell it? I don't know the precise details.
Basically what I got from it was it was gifted to Lily and Disney.
Yes.
They obviously didn't know what to do with a petrified tree. So understandably so. So they put it in Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically the story. Also, you can apparently still ride in a Viewliner at the Portland Zoo.
Oh, really? Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, the Petrified Tree is still there at Disneyland. It's kind of like it's a little monument to Lily and Disney in a way.
Yeah.
The tree, you said?
It's a petrified tree, so it's basically a tree that's been fossilized.
And it's in like a thing. Like if you're standing at Haunted Mansion, it's just like directly across the ridge of America.
Right.
It's very prominent.
I think I do know what you're talking about. Yes.
I mean, I'm sure you'd recognize it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I do. Yeah, I do recognize this. Yes.
Oh.
Okay, so December 20th, 1957, we have the Christmas in Many Lands Parade, which is the first time that Disneyland has openly celebrated Christmas. Really interesting footnote there. And December 31st, 1957, really good timing there. We have the 10 millionth guest enter the park. So right on New Year's. Okay, so January 18th, 1958, small but important footnote, the Disneyland Kennel Club opens in the same location that it's currently operating, right to the side of the main gates. February 12th, 1958, work finishes on the sailing ship Columbia's hull. We'll get to that in a little while. We have March 31st, 1958, the Grand Canyon diorama debuts between Tomorrowland and Main Street on the Disneyland Railroad.
Yeah, another favorite.
I love the Grand... I honestly might like the Grand Canyon even better than the Primeval World.
It's the music helps it a lot.
The music is amazing.
Yeah.
I really love the transition from day to night that goes on in that diorama. That's one of my favorite parts about it.
And
what
just the fact that the entire thing is painted. It was painted by I think two guys.
It's a giant painted mural. Yeah.
What music do they use in the Grand Canyon?
On the trails.
On the trail from the Grand Canyon Suite.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I figured it'd be the Grand Canyon Suite.
Okay. No, the Grand Canyon, that's something that I'm really looking forward to see again when the Disneyland Railroad reopens, because, oh my god. Like I said, I love the Primeval World, but just like Sandy said, the sheer artistry of the diorama of the mural in the Grand Canyon is just incredible.
Yeah.
Okay. And also the Disneyland Railroad opens the Fred G. Gurley engine, the third engine on the Disneyland Railroad fleet. Okay, June 14th, 1958. The Rivers of America fleet of boats is officially complete with the sailing...
What? Tiki, I'm sorry. Go. I just wanted to throw in there with the Grand Canyon Diorama thing. Those were the only taxidermy animals in the park.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I just thought I might throw that in there for the people watching.
That is a good fun fact.
Yeah.
Okay, so July 14th, 1958, Columbia sailing ship begins opening, operating along the rivers of America. And we have a full fleet now of the Mark Twain, the Indian War Canoes, the Mike Fink keelboats, and the Tom Sawyer Island rafts. Also on the same day, the Alice in Wonderland dark ride opens. Alice in Wonderland is... Yes.
My favorite dark ride in the park.
That's a great dark ride.
It really is. It really is. And I think it is very appropriate that I want to say it gets the second longest line out of the dark rides besides Peter Pan.
It does.
I'm definitely not too fond of some of the stuff they redid. Like at the end, they now have the entire end section of the ride completely devoted to the Tea Party. When before
they always had that.
Well,
no, they had the Cheshire Cat before that.
Yeah, they had the Cheshire Cat head.
Yeah.
Going back. I love that. That was like one of my favorite elements of the ride.
The only thing I didn't really like that they changed was that they took out the extra cards that you crash through, like for the crash.
Yeah, they replaced that with the smoke, with swirling smoke. That was so half-assed.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know why they did that.
Projection effects in general, though.
Oh, Soto, the projections are amazing.
Yeah.
The Golden Afternoon Room is really great as well.
You know what they could have done? They could have projected cards that you crash through. That would have been awesome.
Well, I mean, they could have just kept the original crash doors. I don't know why they need to change, especially since like it still has the audio of them.
Yeah.
It's just weird.
Maybe they'll do something with that in the future. I also don't like in the beginning when Alice is seen chasing White Rabbit, because that was before she fell down the rabbit hole, and this is after we've gone down the rabbit hole. So
you're right, but that's always been in there as well.
Yeah.
It's just kind of Alice reminiscing to herself about how she got
It's a nice element. I like what they did to it. Looks like the characters are right there.
Right.
It's projected out.
Okay, so guys, we have just a few more things to get to, and I'm kind of running short on time here. So, August 16th, 1958, the fire truck begins operation on Main Street. It replaced the old chemical and hose truck. September 3rd, 1958, the final episode of the Disneyland TV show airs. That's going to be replaced by Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color in the 60s. We'll get to that in the 60s. September 15th, 1958, the Junior Autopia and Viewliner close. December 31st, 1958, pretty interesting right here, the first New Year's Eve party at Disneyland. Okay. January 1st, 1959, Fantasyland Autopia opens. And there were quite a few different incarnations of Fantasyland Autopia. I want to say there was a midget Autopia.
Yeah, there was midget Autopia.
Which, again, political correctness.
Yeah, midget Autopia is the one that's in Marceline.
Right.
Yeah. Or was donated to Marceline.
So June 6, 1959, the submarine voyage opens, which I think is interesting that it actually opened a few days, about a week before the Matterhorn and the monorail.
I still like the original more than the Nemo version.
I like the original tone of the original, but having said that, AdvBlueDude and I both agree that there's a lot of cool set pieces in the Nemo subs.
There are.
Yeah, I just don't like how much it's all projection. There's almost no animatronics.
There's
a surprising amount of animatronics, I thought.
Yeah.
I guess I never really gave it a fair chance.
And
there are a lot more animatronics than there are in the version in Florida.
I just love the sea monster element in the original and stuff like that.
The sea monster is there. He's just rocks.
Yeah, a rock.
So the sea monster is still there in the ride.
Sort of.
Yeah, but
is he?
He's carved into. He's there's the vague shape of the sea monster in the rocks, but you can tell it's him.
Yeah.
Is it the original?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, that's what I loved about it. I can care less about the rock carving.
Well, I think it's a nice homage.
I will also say that I very much enjoyed riding it at night.
Yes.
I'm glad you cool riding it at night, especially just walking right onto it.
right.
And plus, when you're riding it at night, you actually get the feeling you're underwater, where in the day you can see the sunlight coming up.
Oh, totally.
Exactly.
I mean, the effects
that's
still
a
there
good
when you're in the
That's
building.
A good point.
The effects there when you're in the building, but I like it adds at night being outside. Yeah.
Okay. So then June 14th, 1959, a week later, the Matterhorn bobsleds open in Fantasyland, and this is the first Disney thrill ride and also the first modern steel roller coaster. Adventure Blue Dude, we've had this conversation a lot. The original Aero tubular steel track, the original steel roller coaster, if they took it out, they'd essentially be taking out the first modern steel roller coaster. But goddamn if it ain't bumpy.
I mean, honestly, I think a lot of the problems that the ride has would be solved with them bringing back the original ride vehicles. Because, like, it's still very bumpy, but I think a lot of the reason why it's so uncomfortable is because the ride vehicles are designed terribly. And I never thought I would say that because I always thought that it was exactly the same as the ride vehicles in Space Mountain and Disney World, but it's not, and I don't know why. It looks like it is, but it has nowhere near the same legroom.
Right.
It's just bad.
Okay.
But I love the ride, other than the bumpiness.
Also, one of my favorite little bits of trivia is that Richard Nixon, then the vice president, christened the Disneyland Alweg monorail system.
Yes.
Which
and Bob Gurr kidnapped him.
Okay. And there's that very funny clip where they're trying to cut the big ribbon on the monorail, and they've got the giant scissors and they can't do it, and then Walt Disney steps in with the regular size pair of scissors. Okay.
I remember, maybe I'm thinking of a different one, but I thought he just ripped it, didn't he?
No, he pulled out like a little pair of scissors.
Oh, I remember one of him just ripping it. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm thinking. Maybe I'm making that up. I don't know.
Hey guys, just a couple more notes to go over here. June 15th, 1955, we have the Disneyland 1959, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We have the Disneyland 59 special, which airs on TV, and this celebrates the relaunch of the park following the opening of Subs, Matterhorn, and Monorail. And I can't stress this enough, guys. Really, the whole opening of the Subs, Monorail, and Matterhorn along that whole side area of Disneyland, it changed the game of Disneyland. It really kind of changed the whole face of the park, and it was directly advertised by Disney himself as a complete relaunch of the park. Like, it was basically a reopening of the park, in a way. They had an entire reopening ceremony, a big parade. They had, like, a giant, like, kind of miniature Matterhorn float.
Shit.
What?
I forgot to have the Matterhorn macaroon.
Yes. I told you. I told you, too. I was like, hey, if you want to go to the Gibson Girl, you know, I told you the time to do it, and you didn't listen.
I didn't want ice cream, I'm sorry. And I didn't realize that they had them there. I knew that they had it at the Jolly Holiday Bakery.
They might not have them. They might not. I don't know. Anyway.
They definitely have them at the Jolly Holiday Bakery.
Yeah. So July 3rd, 1959, the Blue Mark I monorail debuts. Then September 13th, the Conestoga Wagons Rainbow Mountain stage closes. October 2nd, 1959, the Rainbow Ridge Pack Mules close. And on October 11th, 1959, this is going to be the last thing that we're going to cover. The Rainbow Cavern Mine Train closes, and preparation begins for the massive Nature's Wonderland expansion to Frontierland. And this is kind of a nice transition because, once again, Disneyland is using an IP. They're using, like, not necessarily the most well-known IP today, but they are using the True Life Adventure documentary series, which was really popular in its time. So just in general, kind of to sum this all up, I want to kind of ask you guys what you think of Disneyland now versus the Disneyland we saw in the 50s. What do you think changed? What do you think is the same? And just kind of how you think, in general, the evolution was in the 1950s. Sandy?
Do I have to go first?
No. Adventure Blue?
Okay.
Do I have to go first?
No. Sandy?
I do this all day, I don't care. No, I mean, a lot, pretty much everything changed, really. Like,
Disneyland is always changing.
I mean, it is. It's in a constant state of evolution. And for better or for worse. But, like, it's always very IP-focused. It's always been very synergistic. So,
right.
really, the only constant is in, like, the operations. I suppose. And I mean that changes in the 90s and 2000s, but it's starting to get back towards like where it once was, and like so the constant is less in what is in the park and more with what the park is, if that makes sense.
And how the park functions in terms of like,
that's what I mean.
And the relationship the park has with the rest of the Disney company and how they use intellectual properties.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it fascinating that not much has really changed. Like, people complain, you know, we have that big news story breaking about Guardians of the Galaxy and the Tower of Terror. By the way, guys, Tower of Terror is an intellectual property, and it's not even owned by Disney.
Well, technically, Twilight Zone is an intellectual property.
You're right.
Sorry.
Thank you. But anyways, I digress. It's like people are always going to fear change, and people are always going to kind of claim that Disney's selling out because of the IPs, but the icon of the park was used as a promotional thing for a film that was 3 years away. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
it's
they've
like
been selling out since the 20s.
At this point in Disney history, like at this point in Disneyland history, I'm willing to embrace the corporate side of the park just because it's been going on since the beginning, you know. Frontierland was mainly devoted to Davy Crockett, and that took up a huge corner of the park. That took up over 50% of the park. It's like, you know, we have the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We had Mike Fink, you know. It's like all these different examples of... And now, of course, we're going to get into some things... I really think the park kind of hit their stride in the 60s and 70s, so I'm really excited to talk about that. And in terms of original concepts that came out of Imagineering. But having said that, you know, I definitely think that IPs and intellectual properties in general have been there since the beginning. Sandy, any last words?
I'm definitely with you. You make a very good point of how the intellectual properties have been there since the very beginning. And, you know, maybe in a few years, in, you know, a decade, maybe two, people are going to be looking back at the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. Maybe if Disney's saying they're going to take that out. No, don't take out the Guardians of the Galaxy ride. That's a classic. We love that one. So people are complaining about it now, but I think the people who are complaining about it now are going to end up loving it.
I actually experienced that same thing with the Nemo subs, where when the Nemo subs first opened, people were complaining about it being an IP. But then when the California drought happened and it was in real danger of closing, people were freaking out.
So closing thoughts on Disneyland, I guess, 50s
in the
as a whole.
1950s, yeah.
Yeah. We're always going to love Disneyland. I think, you know, we all agree that the prices should go back, not forward. The park, I guess.
I mean, I actually think the prices are fairly reasonable considering like how much is offered at Disneyland.
I guess so. I mean, they keep bumping up the price, though. That's the problem I have with it. But I digress. I don't want to get into that conversation.
They've been bumping up the price since the beginning. I mean,
I know, but they're going to continue to, and you know, Disneyland is only so big, so.
17 acres is coming, Sandy. 17 brand spanking new acres.
Oh, really? I didn't hear about that.
It's a little thing called Star Wars Land.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I definitely, if I could, I would definitely travel back in time and, you know, love to experience the Disneyland of the 50s. I really don't know what else to say. I love it now. I even though I didn't experience it then, I loved the Disneyland then, even though there were technical difficulties and project difficulties of the first few years, I guess.
Club Circus.
I'm sorry?
The Mickey Mouse Club Circus was a thing that people
Screw that.
forget about.
Screw that. I would love to go back and experience the old dark rides and Fantasyland and everything. Davy Crockett.
Right.
Aunt Jemima.
Aunt Jemima. All we need to do is go back in time and get a selfie with Aunt Jemima.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. I love it.
AdvBlueDude, any last words?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So I will leave it on that note then, people. Just we need to go back in time and get selfies of Aunt Jemima because that would be amazing. All right. So thank you for joining us on this first podcast. I'm really excited about the future of this series. Disneyland in the 1960s is just a ton of stuff to go over there. We've got the Tiki Room, we've got the Mansion, we've got the Pirates of the Caribbean, and the World's Fair, and that's just some of the stuff that goes on in the 60s. And then from there, we have the thrill rides being introduced in the 70s, and it's a big, grand old time. I can't wait to talk about it.
Well, the animatronics are the overarching thing here.
Of course. Definitely the 1960s, for sure. So, thank you guys for watching, and see you later, and we hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to go get selfies with Aunt Jemima. See you later.